I do want to talk about money a bit because we are Forbes. So let's talk about how much each candidate has raised. Just yesterday, there were reports out that Vice President Kamala Harris has raised over $1 billion. But in August, here are the numbers. Harris had $235.5 million on hand at the end of the month compared to Donald Trump's $134.6 million. In Wisconsin, do Democrats have a better ground game right now, A? And B, how do you compete with that kind of cash?
Well, they do, and the two go hand in hand. They're funding their ground game. They're paying. They've got hundreds of paid staff across the state. We can see it. It has an impact not just on the presidential race, but on other races out there. They should be blowing us away, considering the financial edge they have, and in turn what they're able to do with their ground game, with all these paid staffers then orchestrating and organizing people going door to door, even things as detailed as organizing groups of people writing postcards out to undecided, persuadable voters. So they have a huge financial advantage. The biggest thing that's keeping Republicans, particularly Donald Trump, in the game is that the strength of our issues, the issue matrix, is on the side of conservatives. When you talk about high prices in the economy, when you talk about border security and things like fentanyl overdoses, when you talk about violent crime and public safety concerns, those are the top issues we see. Even at Young America's Foundation, the polling we do, we see college students, number one issue is the economy. So if college students are feeling that way, that's eating into every major Democrat voting category where they've run the score up before. That's what's keeping it competitive, not only in the presidential, but even in this U.S. Senate race between Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's been in Washington about a quarter century, and businessman Eric Hovde. Those are the things that are leveling off. If it was just about money, Harris Waltz, the Democrat ticket, would be blowing Republicans away. Thankfully, the issues are such that it does give a balance to all that money and boots on the ground that we see here in the state.
And we'll move on to that Senate race in just a little bit, but as a Republican who has won multiple elections in the state, do you think this is going to come out to getting those undecided voters, getting those independents, or do you think that this election's coming out more to turnout?
Well, I think it's a combination. I don't think you exclude one or the other. Certainly, it's a big part. It's about turnout. I think part of the turnout model, though, is for Republicans or even some of those that weren't necessarily Republican voters, but who just had it with the last 4 years. They're exhausted, not from the post on X, like some people said they were 4 years ago, but just exhausted from the high prices, from the overwhelming challenges families face all across the country. The key, though, is why turnout and persuasion go hand in hand, is there's a lot of those voters, particularly, say, in the suburbs of Milwaukee, who really had given up on Joe Biden and thought not only was their own problems affecting them in terms of high prices for gas, for food, for their housing, but they just didn't think that Joe Biden was cut to be a president for the next 4 years. They saw some serious challenges, particularly after that first presidential debate. That slipped for a little bit. Some of those folks retreated from leaning towards President Trump after Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, got in the race, just because they said, okay, she's new, she's fresh, she's dynamic, she's got to be better. And the key has been for me and others who've been advocates for President Trump is to connect the dots, to say Joe Biden's policies failed not because he was out of touch, not because of his age, not because of his demeanor, but because they're horrible ideas. They've had a negative effect on the economy. And of course, there was a big benefit in the last few weeks between President Biden himself saying that Vice President Harris had been a part of every major decision throughout his tenure. And then even just this week on The View, when Vice President Harris said she couldn't think of a thing that she'd do differently than President Biden. That really makes the case that I think is compelling, not only for President Trump and Senator Vance, but for everybody else pushing this ticket to say, if you've had it over the last 4 years, if you just can't afford 4 more years of these policies, you got to vote to make a change. And that's where the turnout and persuasion go hand in hand.